the problem is that for a central bank to really alter an economy, what we're talking about is not increased interest rates. We're talking about reduced jobs. It's one thing to take a little bit of money out of everybody's pockets. It's another thing to take a ton of money out of a small portion of people's pockets. If you can eliminate the money from a small portion of people, that's where you start to get the foreclosures, create a recession, and bring all the numbers back into line. The scary thing is that once unemployment starts to happen, it's like a wildfire and it's gone. If it becomes an issue, those longer amortizations have definitely increased the risk.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Should I start it with that? Should I talk about how the Liberal government has made all these people feel like they can easily blame the system, and that's the real problem?
I don't think it's a Liberal government, though.
You don't think it's a Liberal government? This is not the way we normally start the show, but listen, you don't think that the Liberal, any government, let's not put a party in place.
That's where I was going.
Yeah, okay. So any government right now that is doing a really good job of making people angry at each other and then totally screwing the system and not, being like, hey guys, look over there, they're the problem, while they're screwing it up, it's done really well. And the thing that ticked me off about that is they've done an amazing job at blaming something like blind bidding for the problem in the real estate market right now. And anybody that believes blind bidding is the issue or the problem, don't call the listeners idiots, Steve. They're very misguided, and they're successfully misguided by a government that they don't trust in other things. So I don't know, I find it frustrating. Tom, I'm sorry about my rant.
Steve was so fired up. He didn't even let me do the introduction to the show this week. My God. All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to the Tom Storey Show. This is your Sunday Real Estate Roundup podcast, where we go over everything that we think is interesting in the Canadian real estate market. If you're watching us on YouTube, I want to say thank you. We have passed 2,000 subscribers, and we're going to continue to go here. So, Steve, what do you think? Next goal, just 5,000? We'll just skip 3,000. We'll just go next goal is 5,000. Just jump all the way up there.
Just keep going up, ideally.
Let's just keep going up. It's been building, and I went to a summer luncheon for my company, and I don't go outside that often, right? I normally just stay in my basement podcast zone these days, but so many people came up to me and said they listen. So I just want to say thank you to anyone watching or listening that is, showing up here every single Sunday or whatever day of the week that you watch it. If you haven't, make sure to leave this video a like, and if you listen on the audio platforms, we're still waiting for some brand new 5-star Apple audio reviews. Not just click the 5 stars, even though we appreciate that, but let us know what's going on. Let us know what you like about the podcast. We'd really appreciate it. On to today's guest. Some people know him as one of the most followed YouTubers in the Canadian mortgage and finance space. Some people know him as the host of his brand new podcast, The Real Estate 100 Show. Some people know him of that guy with a beard from Calgary. Some people know him as an honorary co-host of the Tom Storey Show, but we just call him our friend Nolan. Nolan Matthias is back. Welcome back, Nolan.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Congrats on 2,000 subscribers on YouTube for the show. Like, wow. Starting my own show recently, I realized that's not easy to do. So, props to you guys.
Well, thank you. We were talking when we did like our 1 year episode, saying like we thought maybe we'd get to like 500 by now because it was going to be a grind, but people keep showing. And what's kind of interesting, Nolan, I love your thoughts on this, is that our subscriber count versus view count is like we get more views than we have subscribers, where then on our bigger channels, I get less views per episode on my main channel than I do have subscribers. That's just something we have to deal with on YouTube. That's just how it works.
Yeah, no kidding. That's interesting. Yeah, I think the subscribers is kind of like a vanity metric, right? I think what's more important is returning viewers. Right. And the higher those, and obviously the public can't see what the returning viewers are, so they see the subscriber count as like the social proof of whether or not something's doing well. But those returning viewer counts are so important, and At the end of the day, as a YouTuber, that's what you need to be paying attention to and be proud of, is if people are continually coming back and watching, that's the win.
I was talking with
saying our main channels suck. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we'll just go all in on the podcast. We'll just do 2 episodes a week instead of our main channel. Maybe that's what we do, Steve. But we've been talking about that, right? Because we're in that race to 10,000. We're still going neck and neck. And I was telling Steve, I was like, does it even matter who gets the most subscribers? All that matters is who gets the views, right? That's what actually matters. That's how YouTube pays you. So that's all they care about. Okay, we will dig into YouTube in a second here. But Nolan, I think a lot of people that listen or watch our show know who you are because they already consume your content or they've seen you as a guest before. But for the few people that don't, like, can you give us a bit of background? Like, who's Nolan? What do you do?
Yeah, totally. So I'm the co-founder of a company called Mortgage 360, which is the first B Corp certified mortgage company in North America. And what that means is we have a certification that companies like Ben & Jerry's and Patagonia have that basically certifies that we do what we say we do. Even though the community stuff that we do, we don't really talk about publicly, but we have this basically certification. They come in, they audit, and they look at how much money we donate to charity, what we do socially within our communities, and whether or not we're actually accountable and transparent. And we just got rescored. I think we've got one of the highest scores in the country, not just for the mortgage industry, but for all businesses. And, it's just, we do good things for the community. We are a family-based company, and our why is to inspire people to thrive and give. It's no longer about doing more deals because we're long past that point, but now it's about how do we use that gift that we've been given to really make change and help people. And that's ultimately why we ended up on YouTube as well, is to be able to help people make change and give better information and better transparency around the mortgage industry and the real estate industry.
And what does the company breakdown look like now? Like, I know you're the CEO of Mortgage 360. I believe you have family members involved. What's the breakdown? And then you got mortgage agents that work with you guys as well? Yep,
exactly. So my wife is the co-founder. She's also one of the top mortgage brokers in the country by volume. She is a workhorse, does a ton of volume. And then my right hand is, her name's Jessica Cubitt. She is phenomenal. She's on mat leave at the moment, but she is also one of the top brokers in the country. So I've got 2 of literally the top production people in Canada working for me and working on our deals. And then we have a couple other people, Leonie, Ashley. All of them are just amazing powerhouse women. Don't get me wrong on this, but women do an amazing job, and when you find amazing ones that can do the work, like, there's nothing better. They have that care for the client as well as that ability to get stuff done and not miss anything, and that's what makes us be able to do the volume of what companies with 50 to 60 people do.
That's really, really cool. I think, okay, so I'm looking at my watch here. It's going to take me about 6 minutes to get to a mortgage question, because we knew we had you here today, and there's lots of things going on. That uncertainty that we felt before that we thought went away for a little while is now back. Now, this episode will come out at the end of June, basically, just for when you're giving these answers, to keep that in mind. The Fed held recently in the States. What does that make? Does that have anything to do with what Bank of Canada will now do in July? Just what are your thoughts on where we're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, the two kind of go hand in hand, but at the same time, there's different dynamics in both countries. I think the main thing to understand is that interest rate sensitivity, just because of the way our financial system works in Canada, is significantly higher. So when the Bank of Canada makes a change, it arguably has more impact for a consumer than what happens when the Fed makes a change in the US, and specifically around lines of credit and 5-year fixed rates and variable and adjustable mortgage rates. In the US, you can go and get a 30-year mortgage. So if you got a mortgage 3 years ago and you haven't moved and you haven't made any changes, like, you're good for the next 30 years as long as you don't change anything. In Canada, it's like, it's inevitable. Everybody is going to have to make a change within 5 years, with the exception of a few really smart or lucky, depending on how you look at it, people who got 10-year mortgages. But pretty much everybody is going to have to face this in the next 3 years. So therefore, when the Bank of Canada makes changes, it filters through the economy a lot faster and with a lot deeper impact. So I don't necessarily think that the Bank of Canada at this point has to do anything based on what the Fed does in the US, but definitely it plays a role in what happens in our economy, especially when dollar fluctuations get played in.
You talked about some of the people that took the 10-year and got lucky, maybe. Speaking of people that got lucky, because we haven't had you on since Steve announced his absolute screw up, which got him 2 years left on like a rate under 3%. I know you did a short video kind of reacting to it, but any thoughts on our friend Steve here and how he's got that horseshoe up his ass on this one?
You know what I find interesting is how many people don't know where they're at in their mortgage. Like my wife, we're mortgage brokers. My wife pulled up our bank accounts yesterday, and she's like, "Did you know we only have a year and a half left on our 2 mortgages, that on our personal residence and one of our rentals?" And I'm like, "Nope, no idea." So we're like year and a half out from those now. They're just on variables. They stay on variables because I'm not going to try to time the market. But yeah, you get lucky, and I think the main thing is pick a strategy and go with it. And Steve did that. He picked fixed rates, and then when rates went down, he went and asked them to blend and extend, and then completely forgot he did that. So I think being forgetful has some benefits.
So Steve, after these 2 years, I know we've talked about this a few times, but have you changed your mind on what you're doing? You're just going to try and pay everything off, or are you going to, where are you going to go with the rate? Are you going to take another, if in 2 years the fixed rates are still at 5%, are you taking fixed? Are you being mixed or fixed always?
Of course I'm taking fixed. Why would I do that? I'm not going to gamble. I'm not that guy. I do have the HELOC portion, right? So I don't want to say I'm totally fixed, but yeah, there's a lot of people that thought they were going to be smart and didn't do the super secure thing like I always do. Like I'm always Mr. Safety first. My kids have boring lives probably as a result. So I'm probably going to fix. I'm probably going to fix everything. I'm going to fix my condo when it comes up for sure, even though the payment's going to be a lot higher.
Is there any, if we get to that moment in time and the gap between a fixed and a variable, I'm not saying this is going to happen, I'm just playing a scenario here, is 2 full points. Would you ever go variable knowing you could lock into a fixed if you start seeing things go up again? Or are you just always taking fixed no matter what? You're just blind to the variable.
If it's 2 full points, Tom, maybe you got an argument there. Will that happen? I don't think so. What is it historically, Nolan? Is it like,
it's usually a point lower, isn't it? Kind of.
Is it a point? Is it half a point?
In my career, it's kind of ran anywhere from half a point to a full point in favor of the variable. Now it's like, as of today, it's still about 1% difference in favor of the fixed. So I don't know. I think Steve would probably just take a 1-year fix just to remain right on this, is what it comes down to. Yeah, no, it's still fixed. 1-year mortgage, but still fixed.
I've got, I want Nolan's advice. I'm not going to bring it up yet. I'm going to save it till later on the episode, but I want to talk about my current situation on my principal residence, what I should do moving forward. I'd love your advice here live. Nolan, what I want to ask you about next is that the inflation report, the next inflation report that I think is the June one, but comes out in July. I think that's how it works. But I believe it's scheduled to come out after the next potential announcement by Bank of Canada, where that data is going to be very, very helpful. Based on it coming out after, do you think that will impact anything Tiff and the gang do, or no?
No, the Bank of Canada has access to the preliminary data before they make the decisions, so they have more real-time data. They'll make the decision based on whatever that says, and we might just be looking at it a couple weeks later going, oh, interesting, that's why they did that.
Okay, so they have access to this long before the public does.
Oh yeah, totally. And they've got their own data as well. I mean, they're doing just as much to make sure they're ahead of the game as anybody. But yeah, we get it. We have a delay on it for sure.
When they raised on the last announcement, a lot of the articles that came out and videos that we all did said something along the lines of this happened unexpectedly, or I was a bit surprised by this. And to then which all the YouTube commenters said, no, I knew this was happening. This was obviously going to happen. But even Bloomberg was running articles that said, we weren't thinking this was going to happen. Were you a little bit surprised that they actually did it? Yeah.
Totally. And I mean, I think confirmation bias the last couple of years has been really, really incredible because people are just like, yeah, I knew rates were going to go up. You were crazy. You didn't see them printing money. And it's like, yeah, there's other stuff that happened, right?
Right.
But I think what was surprising was not the fact that the Bank of Canada increased rates. I think that was absolutely a given. The deviation from what they've been doing since 2020 was they didn't forecast that they were going to do it. So in other words, leading up to rate changes the last couple of years, they've said they've given indications that we're about to make changes in the following meeting. And this time around, they just did it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, there's certain things you can do as a central bank in order to affect the economy. The first is obvious, you change the rates. The second is you talk about changing the rates. And then the third is you do it by surprise to create a shock. And sometimes an economy needs a shock in order to have that effect happen immediately and to a greater extent. So by not saying that they were going to do it and just doing it, I think probably their hope was that the consumers would sit there and reconsider what they were doing, because anything can now happen with respect to interest rates, and what we think will happen, which is a lot of people thought interest rates were going to go down before they went up, isn't necessarily the case. So that shock and awe tactic was all about getting people to change their habits fast.
Not that I should admit this, but I've already made it. I was wrong about the housing market video when I went over my last year's predictions, but my predictions for this year said we were going to have a rate cut in Q3. So it is not looking good so far.
Yeah, you were wrong again. No,
everybody's thinking that, right? Everybody's thinking that. This is the way I saw it play out. Everybody was like, no, not going to have the quarter, not going to have the quarter point, probably not going to have one in July. And then they do the quarter point in June. And then everybody goes, of course, there's another one coming in July. It's like, oh, guys, you're killing me. And Tom, did you watch that video I sent you with our friend Jerome Powell down south?
No, I was out for a dinner last night when you sent me that text, and I wasn't going to go into the other room for 10 minutes and watch a video on interest rates. But can you explain what he said?
First of all, that is my party strategy. So go into the other room and watch a YouTube video. Yeah, he basically broke down and said, yeah, we're not doing anything right now, but we expect 2 more quarter point increases by the end of the year. They have a weird thing. I don't know if Nolan can explain how this happens, but they have like a range, not a particular interest rate like the Bank of Canada does. But they said by the end of this year, they expect it. What are they at? 5.25 right now? Whatever it is, 5.25, I think. 5 to 5.25. Sorry, that's how they work. They expect their average interest rate at the end of this year to be 5.6.
And to the consumer, Nolan, that would mean that interest rates in the States are pushing over 7%, right?
Yep, more or less. Crazy. I don't know how that actually breaks down on their actual mortgage pricing, because I mean, I could look at it and I've done work with guys in the States, but how they price their mortgages is completely different than how we price our mortgages. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, that means there's going to be probably on a 30-year mortgage, I have to think it's around 7.5% if their overnight rate gets to 5.5 or their Fed rate gets to 5.5.
So they expect the Fed rate to be 5.6 by the end of this year as their average rate. Then they said the end of next year, 4.6. The end of the following year after that, 3.4. That's
wow.
their and he also admitted that is half a point higher for those same timeframes than previous to this meeting. So they are expecting, I hate saying it, higher rates longer. Right? Yep. They are saying, okay, yeah, we will be higher for longer. So Tom Storey, you missed your opportunity 3 weeks ago to lock into your 5-year rate like I friggin' well told you to do.
This episode of the Tom Storey Show is brought to you by Masters Academy. Masters Academy is the #1 real estate conference you can go to as an active real estate agent in the country of Canada. I really do mean that. Steve and myself will be there in person, and for the first time since 2019, it's happening in person in Vancouver. I am super excited to fly out and see everybody in person. It is run by Richard Robbins and his entire team. He's been my #1 mentor in the real estate industry. And Steve, we've talked about this a lot, but in terms of like, yeah, sure, people can teach you how to sell more things in whatever you do for a living, but if you don't actually enjoy your life, what the hell is the point? So I know I'm going to be there. Steve, you're going to be there. What are you most excited for from this upcoming event?
I go to this event twice a year, once in Toronto and then once in Vancouver when they have it. Like you said, it's back now. But what I look forward to the most is seeing my friends who are most top producing agents, and many of them have been here on this show. So seeing them, bouncing ideas off of them, that's my favorite part. However, if you are a struggling newcomer to the business, let's call it, or if you've been in the business and just need a reset, this is the place for you. These top producing people that have been here on this podcast, let me tell you, they have learned a lot of what they do every single day at this event. And this year, it's back in Vancouver at the Hyatt Regency, July 5 and 6.
And if you're a listener of the Tom Storey Show, we have something pretty cool to tell you. If you want to buy a ticket to this year's event, you can go into the link in the description and you can get $200 off your ticket. When you click on that link, make sure you click the Tom Show logo and it will send you to a page to get a discount on your ticket. Joe Polish will be speaking at this event. So if you're obsessed with marketing like Steve and I am, that's something you should go for. That's worth the price of admission alone. And you're going to hear from Richard. You're going to hear lightning rounds, genius interviews. I remember the first one of these conferences I ever went to. I sat in the back row and I was so intimidated. And then 3 years later, I was standing on the stage telling people what was going on and what was working for me. So it's so crazy what it can do to transform your career. Don't be silly. Buy a ticket. Come say hi to me and Steve. I'll have a sour beer. See, Steve will probably have a whiskey or something for you, and we'll have a great time. Link in the description. $200 off if you go to the link in the description. We hope to see you there July 5th and 6th in Vancouver, Masters Academy, hosted by Richard Robbins. And now, back to the show. Yeah, the bond market's not treating me well. I still got some time. I'll be okay. We'll see what happens in the next few months. Let's see what that inflation report looks like, and then maybe I have the conversation then. And I think for Bank of Canada as well, they've got to be looking at the housing data across Canada and kind of scratching their head a little bit to start this year, right? Because for the first 5 months, like us as realtors were like, what's going on here? How's this picking up so quickly? And for you on the mortgage side, Nolan, were you like being like, oh, wow, we're approving a lot more people than we thought this early on in the game? Like nothing's like, I know the pause happened. Well, the pause, and then there's no pause anymore, but the market came back.
Yeah, and what's interesting is if you look at the new mortgage origination data, new mortgage originations are at the lowest they've been in 20 years.
Oh. So
what that tells us is that there's less buying activity. The difference is that there's also less selling activity. And you know, I know the Toronto numbers were up about 25% compared to last year, but those numbers were also down significantly compared to the year prior. So, you know, I think there's a few things. There's actually a really great article on The Economist on this right now, because this isn't a Canada problem, right? This is something that is happening in New Zealand, in Australia, in the US, in Scotland, in the UK, all over Europe. It's the same thing. It's like interest rates went up, but housing prices only came down a little bit, and then there's been a resurgence. And the Economist article was really interesting because it pointed out 3 factors. The first was obviously migration. I mean, I have to think that if you had any sort of nest egg and you lived in any sort of not modern economy, and you were on the fence about thinking about moving to a modern economy like Australia or Canada or the UK, you were sitting there going, I'm thinking about it, and then COVID hit and you went through all of that in those countries. I got to think you're on the first flight out, right? So migration was the first piece. The second piece was household finances, which are significantly better off than they were pre-pandemic. I mean, people got forced into the habit of learning how to save. And then on top of that, the jobs picture has made it so that most people have not found themselves in a situation where they're out of work yet, unless they're an absolute imbecile and got fired for cause. And then the third piece
because I hate you. Anyways, go on.
Exactly. I've never done that. And then the third was preferences change. So like people have gotten used to having the home office and the home gym, and that means a bigger house. And like I'm sitting here right now. So Jen used to always go to the office every single day. I started to stay at home, film YouTube videos, and now like she's like, why would I drive to the office for an hour every day and back? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I've been saying, but I need you to leave because I'm trying to do stuff, right? Yeah, but people's preferences have changed. They don't want to do that commute anymore. And and that has led to people still wanting those bigger houses, and that piece has not changed. Now people still want to be a little more social, but we've kind of like moved the needle for where normal is, and moved that equilibrium in the housing market, because when you've got commercial vacancies as high as they are, guess where people are working from.
You know what? We did a dinner last night. We had done a boot camp with real estate agents for the spring market. And we did like a boot camp's champ dinner. We took all the people, the highest performers, out for a big dinner last night. And it was interesting. We went out for drinks after, and quite a few of them had said, like, this is so nice. I haven't been out with this many people in this environment for so long. Like, COVID really changed how often I go out and the people that I see. And it was just really, I'd never really thought about it, but I was like, oh yeah, I guess me too. Even like I was in office every day, always pre-pandemic. Now I'm in the office twice a week, maybe. Now I move further away, so it's more of a drive to get there. But on the social aspect as well, like, I guess we're just more used to being at home now. Maybe that's just a thing that's just the norm compared to what it used to be.
I mean, let me ask you guys this question, because this is like what I'm feeling, and I haven't actually talked to anybody about this, and you guys can be my therapist for the next 20 minutes. But I feel like I'd rather spend time out with people I really love spending time out with now. And that means that I don't go to the events as much as I used to, and that I don't go, like, I used to go to every single hockey game, and I'm not even going to renew my hockey tickets this year. And it's just like, when I go out, I want to be with those few people that I really love, and I don't really want to be, just out for the sake of being out anymore, both from a financial perspective and from the perspective of just like mental health.
I get happy when plans get canceled all the time. I'm like, all right, like, I don't have to. I mean, now with a young kid, there's also like, not to say I give people excuses why I can't do things, but there is an obvious reason that's hard to say, no, oh, come on, you got to do it. Like, no, man, my kid's sick. Like,
I got a question for you guys in regards to the commercial vacancies. Yeah. Because I haven't looked into it. I don't do anything to do with commercial real estate, so I don't really care. But obviously it's going to affect the people that we know that are going into work every day. When they say the commercial vacancies are so much, or there's just, is it companies have gone and those spaces are no longer leased? Or is it like when they use like, 60% or whatever the article I saw in Toronto downtown office spaces is whatever percentage vacant? Or does that mean that so many people out of each company are working from home each day? It couldn't really clarify to me. Is this actually vacant space where the landlord is eating the expense? Or is this, you know what, we don't need as much office space for our company anymore because 60% of the time people are working from home?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. So I think I misspoke with respect to commercial, because I think you have to be real specific on that. It's not commercial necessarily, it's office space, because retail and industrial is like at all-time highs. But it's that commercial office space that's at vacancies, and that's having all the vacancies. And I think if you look at like companies like Apple and companies like Google who are saying, and Tesla saying, get back to the office, you cannot work at home anymore, and their workforces are going, make us, and just staying at home, like, that's an indication of what's happening. I got a buddy who's a partner with one of the big 4 accounting firms, and his staff, like, their accountants, they're used to being in the office, working on the computers at the office in their cubicles, right? He's like, maybe they're there 2 days a week now, which means they just downsized to shared cubicles, and that's where they're working out of. So,
and people have to be very weary of that, because there's going to be, if Google, with Apple, everything's going up again right now, all their stock prices and everything. But if stuff gets as bad as people sometimes want it to get, they're going to say, cool, hold my beer. Goodbye, 100,000 employees, right? And now who wants to work from home, and who wants to come back into the office? The employees have to be very careful here over the next little bit, if indeed you think that money is not endless, and that you want to keep your job. Because if it goes that way, there are companies who are just going to start axing people that don't come back in.
Could you not see this as a positive, though, in another way? So we see this as a problem because people have signed these big leases. Like, Shopify had two massive ones right in the area that I used to live. They just left one. The other one, they said they're not going. I'm assuming they're trying to sublease or whatever they're doing, but signed, huge lease agreements. But then there's talk with this empty office space in these towers, taking it and using that space and converting it back to residential.
Not going to happen.
You don't think it's going to happen? Why would that not happen? Just too much money involved to redo it?
We have to pretend that physical space doesn't matter. Right? Like they're not the same buildings. They're not. I mean,
But
maybe
the
if
only
you just
difference
line up
is-
dormitories to house people in single room occupancies, and then everybody shares a bathroom on the main floor and a kitchen. I mean, I guess if you want to live in communist style living, go for it. But those buildings are not designed for residential. It's not going to.
Another real estate agent just try not to bring housing supply to the market. Steve Karrasch.
That's it. I'm also lying about the housing supplies being built, apparently,
Oh,
too. So.
can we talk about that? Because Nolan, Steve actually only exclusively reads Better Dwellings. That's his go-to for all his news.
They're really good.
I think maybe that he subscribes to them, pays the money or something. I think he's really into it. Steve, can you go over? There was a recent article that came out that actually showed that I think population growth versus new housing was actually greater than population growth for 2019.
No, that was a
2020.
that was a comment. That was a comment on my channel. I actually haven't looked into it, but it was something about all real estate agents are lying because population growth between 2019 and 2021 was not. Or house building outpaced population growth. And I've looked not into this at all, so I don't know. But I'm just going to, in my mind here, think through this for a second. 2020, when we had this much immigration.
That's zero for the people not watching. Yep.
Yeah, and for the audio listeners, zero immigration for the year. And construction continued. I have 3 brother-in-laws in construction. None of them took a day off for COVID. Construction went all the way through. There was no 2 weeks off, not even at the beginning. So of course, maybe there's an argument there. But the one, the Better Dwelling article that was actually quoted in the Financial Post. So the Financial Post is now quoting Better Dwelling, by the way, which I think is questionable at best. They're saying I did a video on it. Just a rant video, not very well thought out. Probably should have been a better.
So just a typical video on your channel. Yeah,
typical video. I do. Yeah.
Did you do the rant or the cat?
No cat appeared. Just a rant. I probably should have thought it out better, but it was just basically saying that the first-time homebuyer incentives that are being brought into the market are propping up the marketplace, like the first home savings account and all that sort of thing. And it's like, first of all, there's $8,000 worth of tax benefits there right now because it's first year. So it's nothing yet. The article also went in to say that this will cost 700, whatever it was, hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer revenue lost. And I'm like, wait a minute, taxpayer revenue lost. That is taxpayers saving, right?
Yes.
Right. So this is lack of taxation. So the article was already taking the opinion that more tax is better for everyone. Right. So I don't know. It was so ridiculous because the first time home buyer incentives are probably the incentives we need the most.
The first home savings account is, in my opinion, the only good thing that's come out for first time home buyers in probably a decade.
And then the other ones that they quoted were that government ownership program where
nobody uses it though.
That 450 people or something like that have used in its year.
Oh, you mean the most unsuccessful government program in the history of Canada?
Hey, I wonder how much that costs.
Unsuccessful government programs, there are lots. So let's not judge this particular one.
No, that one was the worst.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, it's number one.
The uptake on it was so minimal, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And then the other one was the first-time homebuyer tax credit, which I actually know nothing about. Again, it's a tax credit, so I'm in favor. We pay a lot of taxes. If I would assume you can only get a tax credit if you're making a certain amount of income and contributing to the overall society in the first place. So I just thought it was hilarious that none of that, or all of that, I guess, is propping up the housing market. Nothing to do with the 1 million people we let in last year.
Yeah, no. All of that stuff's just a rounding error.
Yeah. Not even a rounding error. 400, what is it? It was somewhere between 420 and 450 people used that stupid homeownership program.
Yeah, and it was ridiculous how few people used it. And then on the tax side of things, on the first-time homebuyers savings account, like to argue that that's depleting the tax base. I mean, it all flows through eventually anyways. The government gets their piece. At some point in that process, they're going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, at that time, hey, RSPs are a bad news thing, then. I guess we should take those away too, right?
Nolan, if someone had money sitting around right now and they weren't thinking about investing in real estate, would you be putting into a GIC based on where GICs are at?
I might put a percentage of it into GICs, but I'd also not want to forgo any future gains in the stock market either, right? I have to tell you exactly how my portfolio works and always has. You could invest just straight in the S&P 500 and your returns would probably be a little bit better in the short term. But over the long term, what I do is I've got about 60% in bonds because those keep getting cheaper as interest rates go up. And so I keep buying them. I've got about 30% in the S&P 500. Half of it's Canadian hedged, half of it's not Canadian hedged. So in other words, half of it, if the Canadian dollar tanks, I'm protected on, and the other half I'm not. So if the Canadian dollar does really well, it goes the opposite direction. And then, so I've got a little bit of a currency play there. And then the rest of it is in a little bit of gold and a little bit of commodities. And I have there's a company called Passive. It's Passive without the E on the end. They're amazing. You get them through Questrade. Questrade actually pays for your membership to Passive. You set up the portfolio once, and then once a month you make your contribution, and then you go press a button, and it rebalances the portfolio for you. And I think doing it that way, I mean, I could change out the bonds for a GIC, but there's no point really. But doing it that way, you get the benefits of the stock market as well as the security of the bond market, which the whole design of that portfolio is so that if there's a crash, the drawdown on the crash is significantly less than what it would be if you were just in stocks.
I think this is actually a perfect segue because we have listeners on this show that maybe don't own yet, are renting, that are looking to get into the market, that are trying to save. We have people that own their first home, maybe looking to jump up. And then we've got very savvy investors that may own over 5 to 10 properties, right? Nolan, you put out a video that I thought was awesome, and we had talked about it when I came on to your podcast, which I want to get more into actually. But you talked about the optimal order in which to invest your money into real estate. And it was kind of like a stepping stone. Would you mind sharing that? Because I think that's very valuable.
Yeah. So this is something I learned from a guy named Larry Kendall down in Fort Collins, Colorado. Incredibly successful real estate agent, but also somebody who's sold a ton of investment real estate to people. And basically he created what's called the evergreen investment tree. And what you do is you start by earning an income, and then there's a couple of layers to it too that I skipped in the video that I did. But then in an ideal world, you'd go out and you'd get insurance because it's super cheap when you're like 18 years old. And then from there, you start investing in or start saving in tax advantaged accounts. So in Canada, that would be a TFSA or an RSP or a tax-free savings account or tax-free first-time homebuyer savings account. Excuse me. And then from there, you buy your first home. And once you bought your first home and you can manage it for a couple of years, then you go and you start looking at buying condos. You start looking at buying single family homes as rental properties. Then over time, those are going to have their mortgages paid down. It's going to provide you enough equity that you can essentially start buying apartment buildings. And from apartment buildings, you can move into commercial buildings like industrial or like retail. And from there, you start buying land that you look to develop. And the reason why this exists is because the big mistake a lot of people make is they'll jump into the real estate market and they'll buy a piece of property with the intent of improving it to make a profit. And that's developing. That's the top of the pyramid right out of the gate. And if you don't have all of the other pieces before it to back you up, if the market turns or something goes wrong, it's the fastest way to see your net worth go past zero on the way down. So the idea is you're trying to build your income, your savings, your investments that are not in real estate then your investments that are in real estate in an order so that if something fails in the middle, there's other things there to back it up, which is also interesting from a real estate investing perspective because it implies that you aren't just putting all your money into investing in real estate, you're trying to grow non-real estate assets at the same time as well.
So if you were starting from zero, let's just run through this. So you're starting from zero, you're an 18 to 25-year-old listening to this, you get a job, so you have an income. So that's step one. Then you're saying potentially get insurance because it's cheaper when you're younger.
If you plan on having a family and people that could potentially have to rely on you. And by the way, the job piece, the most important piece of that is make sure you're getting a job that your income is going to be scalable over the long term.
Gotcha. Okay, so scalable income job, insurance, then taking advantage of the saving accounts that you have, the tax-free savings accounts in Canada, then investing into other things, and then principal residence, buying your first property, then investment property, then commercial, and then development. Did I miss something there? Or is that's it?
Yeah,
okay.
I add in after buying residential properties, basically buying apartment buildings is the next step before you get into like retail commercial. But yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it.
That's really, I've never heard it broken down like that, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And everybody wants to jump way ahead in the process. But if you do it that way over 40 years, like you're guaranteed success and at super low risk.
Yeah. Cause I'm even thinking like I've gotten to the buy investment properties portion of this, but I've been stuck there for 5 years because I never went into the apartment building or commercial real estate zone. I've stayed out of that.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, I've got my personal residence. You're younger than I am. So I think that where this really starts to snowball is when you're in your like late 40s, early 50s. But for me, I've got personal residence. I've got a couple rental properties, and I'm just waiting for those rental properties to get themselves into a position where I can refinance them and purchase a residential building. And yeah, I could go, an apartment building. I could go and I could do that now. But if I do that now and something goes wrong on the apartment building, if I don't have the other pieces to fall back on, I'm done. So I'd rather do it slowly and then at 60 years old be like really good than do it fast and have to start all over again.
And is this a model? Because like I'm looking at Steve as we're talking about this, and I'm just thinking what he's maybe thinking about, where it's like, okay, you could do this model, but there's obviously still risks involved every step you take up that ladder, right? Where let's say you buy your principal residence, you have the job, then you buy an investment property, and then instead of doing the next thing, you just pay off your principal residence and you have no debt other than the investment property that's cash flowing, and you're like, all right, my life is set. But then you're going to be stuck there. Steve, is that more what you'd want to do? Because you don't. I'm honestly just thinking out loud here. I
don't think about apartment buildings just because here, like, if you have an apartment building come up, the cost is so crazy, and there's so many buyers. Like, it's not the same thing. I know people. I was just talking to somebody last week that's buying 15, 16 unit apartment rentals in Calgary and Alberta, and they're, CMHC financing them, and it's all cash flow and it's all gravy. And I'm just like, first of all, I don't want to invest in a market I don't know. But I don't even consider it here. I'm working so hard to be mortgage free. I'm so close. Yeah. And I think there's going to be a level of freedom that comes with that. I've never been a fan of leveraging hard, but I do know, here is my theory. The second my house is paid off, that is the day I will go buy a new rental property, because I should always have a mortgage of some sort, even if I have to feed it. I should have something, because think about it. If I can afford $1,500, $2,500, $3,500 a month in my principal residence and it's paid, I should probably continue to use that leverage and not just spend that money on vacations and other stuff.
Or at the very least have like a second home as a vacation home, right? And a couple of things kind of come up for me there as you were talking. Like, first of all, is when you start looking at apartment buildings, apartment buildings aren't based on what you qualify for. They're based on whether that makes sense as an investment. And I think that's the point where you can start looking at other markets and start looking at the fundamentals of other markets. Because if you do this right, you've also got experience in buying at least 4 residential units in your existing market. So you figured out how to look at a market, you've got some experience, and then buying in a different market at that point doesn't become such a big deal. My fear would be the guys who are coming into Calgary who are like, let's buy an apartment building, who have never owned 4 residential homes before, because if you don't have that experience, like apartment buildings are a different beast, right?
Nolan, for apartment buildings though, like let's say you get to the level where you own your principal residence, you have a few like easier investments like condo units or something. You're like, okay, I want to hit that next level. I want to buy an 8-unit small apartment building or something like that, right? To get qualified for that on the mortgage side of things with CMHC, is it, correct me if I'm wrong, is it just net worth and having the down payment, or do you have to show pay stubs like you would on a principal residence?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the lender, but for the most part, they're more looking at the property and the fundamentals of the property. And what ends up happening is when you buy that type of real estate, the more down payment that you have, the more you can make numbers come into line on the property. And then CMHC, depending on the property, I think has typically a $400,000 personal guarantee.
Okay.
So, you might be buying a property with a $1.5 million mortgage where you have a smaller personal guarantee against it than you would if you're buying a residential property that you have a full personal guarantee on, right?
Because when you get to that level of the playing field and then you start owning apartment buildings, and then the apartment building you bought for $1.2 million is now worth $1.8 million, right? Then you can choose, okay, you either refi it and you do something, or you could take that and now that adds to your total net worth. And then that helps you get the next one. So it's just like, I guess it's just, I'm talking about monopoly, right? Like you keep going up the ladder and then it's easier to grab more and more and build what is truly that generational large amounts of wealth.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really hard for somebody in real estate these days to build generational wealth. I have a really good friend who owns a lot of real estate, and he like Ferrari driving guy, and doesn't just drive it but actually owns it. And he's even sitting there looking at it with hundreds and hundreds of properties, and he's like, for me to get real generational wealth so that not just my kids but my kids' kids are taken care of, he thinks it's really difficult. If you just bought a house, no rental properties, paid it off, and then never had to worry about a mortgage again, for 99% of people, well, let's call that the 90%. You're perfect. That's great. That's an awesome strategy. If you want to go a step further and have your income replaced for the rest of your life, and you just get to 4 properties, like that's golden. When we start talking about going further up that ladder and taking that further risk, what you're trying to do there is like you're trying to live a different lifestyle, which can be good or bad. And again, that's where risk comes in. You start chasing your buddies that drive Ferraris, and you start making mistakes pretty quickly.
But Tom, I guess I probably should have asked your permission to bring this up before.
You can bring it up. I'm going to do it. I know what you're going to say, so it's fine.
Well, you're the person on this call that owns a multifamily outside of your market.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, really?
So, I'm part of an LP. I don't own it 100% me.
But it's in your portfolio, if we're using fancy words.
Yep.
So what has that experience been like? And
so
how does this all fit in?
I have never physically been to the property. But what I will say is that the partner in which I purchased it with, what he does for a living is analyze multifamily properties for the company he works for, and made them a lot of money over the last decade, and was like, I want to start doing this for myself, building my own wealth. He lives in the market in which we bought this asset, and we are paying him to do property management because that's literally what he did he worked for a big REIT. I'm not going to say who, but like he knew what he was doing. So I would have never done this if I didn't have that specific person on the other side of things.
I think I know who you're talking about too.
Yeah, you do. And we took CMHC mortgage. We locked in at perfect time. I think it was end of 2021. Did really well on the rate. It's cash flowing. Tenants have moved out and rents have gone up, and we're doing, like, I'm very happy with the investment. But but I never step foot inside the house.
No, this is where I have to add like my caveat to all of this stuff. Like,
this episode of the Tom Storey Show is sponsored by Karrasch Real Properties. Here's the deal. If you're moving to Fraser Valley, oh my God. Here's the deal.
Okay, let's see if you can at least get this right, Tom, because you've screwed it up so many times before.
Fraser?
Say it with me.
Fraser.
Fraser Valley.
Fraser.
Okay.
Yep, Fraser.
Pick it up from there. Fraser Valley.
Fraser Valley. Fraser. No. Fraser.
Fraser Valley.
Rick
Just
Razor.
say Surrey. Surrey.
If you're moving to Surrey, there's one person that you need to call, and it just so happens to be my podcast co-host. Now, I make lots of jokes, at Steve's expense during the podcast, but the reality is, if I was moving to Surrey or the surrounding areas, I would call him because they're really damn good at what they do. They understand the market. And I know whether you're buying tomorrow or you're going to buy in 2 years, they will be with you until the end of the transaction. They know what they're talking about. They have experience. Even though Steve looks old, he's not actually that old. So he's still kind of hip, right? He still kind of knows what's going on. But I have personally referred my clients when they're moving out there to Steve and his team, and they've always done an amazing job and rolled out the red carpet for them. Now, Steve, I know it's weird that you're even here as I'm doing this ad read, but if someone were to be moving to your area, how could they connect with you?
Super simple. You can go into the show notes, book a call with me right now using the link in the description of this show. Pick a time that works best for you. Set up a call, either a buyer consultation, a seller consultation, or Tom Storey's line. If you just want to have a chat about real estate, you can do that too using the link in the description below.
Yeah. And I know from personal experience with my clients, connecting with Steve, is that it's a no pressure situation. You're just going to be educated. And when you're ready to make that decision, they'll be there to guide you through it. Also, if you are a real estate agent that listens to our show and you have clients moving out to the west coast of Canada, connect with Steve first and see if they can be of assistance. You can go into the first link in the description and book that call with Steve directly as well. Thank you. And now back to the show.
Wait, Tom, you forgot one thing. This communication is not intended to cause or induce breach of any agency agreement. Existing agency agreement? I think I got it right.
You doing this, being an experienced realtor and investing with somebody who's experienced in commercial real estate investing, I think is one thing. But one of my other rules of investment properties is always maintain full control of your money. Because what the big fear I have for people is that there's guys out there selling opportunities to buy into commercial real estate and apartment buildings and all of that stuff that also don't have a clue what they're doing. They read a book or took a course somewhere. What you're doing is different, but this is like where people need to be cautious. And that's why I always say, like, maintain complete and 100% control of your money, unless you're in a situation where you're a sophisticated investor and the guy that you're dealing with is somebody that you know well and know is also a sophisticated investor, right?
Do you think there's any future for the fractional ownership? And I don't mean like 50%. I mean like owning 0.5% of an asset. Like there's those ads on YouTube now with Masterworks where they do it with artwork and where you buy a little piece and stuff. Is that ever, like, I know there's lots of companies that have tried it. Is that in our future anywhere here? Are people actually interested in that? Because that's not really having control either, right?
Yeah, I think that's something that that comes and goes as a fad. Like it's something that's happened in the past as well. Masterworks actually reached out to me and wanted to sponsor my my YouTube channel. And when I looked at it and I looked at the fundamentals of it and I went, okay, I don't have control. I don't know the asset. And I'm just kind of taking a flyer on the fact that art's cool and that they're going to do well. Like to me, it didn't make a good investment for me. So therefore it wasn't something that I wanted to go out and promote as well. But I think it's something that it's becoming easier with technology, but I think a few of them go bust and a few people get screwed and it turns into a Bernie Madoff situation really fast where people go, maybe I won't do that.
Yeah.
We had a few of those. The one company in particular that does that with real estate here locally in Vancouver reach out and want to advertise with us. And it didn't really pan out because their play to advertise was basically sell people into our product, right? And I was like, well, I mean, obviously that's what advertising is, but at the same time, it's not just like, hey, I'm a real estate agent. I can't just sell fractional ownership. so it didn't really work out. I did think that they had some really interesting properties that they were buying, and there just wasn't enough of them. I guess they were probably a small enough a company where they were securing certain buildings at certain times and then financing, basically group funding them. And there were some really good ones. And then there were other ones where I was like, it doesn't excite me at all. So it was, I don't know. I don't think it will really take off as any sort of investment. I mean, it's not ownership of real estate, really. It's ownership of a company that owns real estate is the way I basically look at it. So,
yeah. So think about like 2006, 2007-ish. I'm not sure that's the right timelines, but when I remember back then, there was so many companies. I think the big one that had the biggest fallout is, I think it was Concrete Equities. If I got that name wrong and I said the wrong company and that company still exists, I apologize immediately. But I think it was Concrete Equities that they were doing that 10, 15 years ago. And it was like, yeah, everyone come in, we're going to do a seminar, buy in, and we're going to buy these properties. And then it went completely bust really fast. And the only difference today is that you can do it with technology and do it faster. And, these things go in cycles. And guess what? As the market kind of goes up and down over the next little while, that's going to come back. The question is, do you want to be involved in it? And if you're involved in it, are you keeping the percentage to a low enough percentage that if that one investment fails, it's not going to tank you? And then how do you pick the right people? Like, don't get me wrong, there's probably going to be a time, this is in the long-term plan, where I'm going to buy a property and I'm going to invite my friends and invite people that are in the industry into that. But then, I'm taking on a lot of risk for those people. So I'd want to make sure that it's good properties and whatnot. But, just blindly investing because somebody's making a good presentation is pretty dangerous.
Yeah. I've owned real estate with a partner in the past. And actually, it was my financial advisor that gave me this piece of advice. He's like, if you have the opportunity to get out with a profit and everyone is still on good terms, do it. He's because if you
when did you get out? When did you get out of this one? What year did you get out?
We bought it in 2012, I want to say. Sold it in 2017.
When you got out with the money, did the money pay off your principal residence or buy another investment property? Like, what happened with the money?
Oh, I used a portion of the money for renovation. Okay. And I used the other, like a lot, RSPs, paying down a lump sum on my current mortgage. At that time, it was trying to reduce headaches, but also I wanted to not wait until things got bad and then one person wants out of the transaction, the other person doesn't, or out of the investment, the other person doesn't, and that can go south really quickly. Now, if I held that property until now,
that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, no, I 100% would have it. I would have made at least 100% more profit than I did at that time, if not more. The profit that I pulled out would have been at least 100% more. So should I have kept it? And that's after, that was a 50-50 ownership. Mm-hmm. So should I have kept it? Sure. Did it give me other opportunities? It did. And it also made my life a little bit easier. It was my first step into owning an investment property, of which taught me a lot. And I have bought another investment property since then. And not only did I learn how to deal with tenants, I put I put my basement rental in. So I did that. It taught me a ton, and I'm glad it went as well as it did. But I did take the opportunity to get out.
Nolan, do you own real estate with other people other than your wife?
No. And I mean, I never would. I know people who bought properties in Calgary in 2006 who are still looking for the opportunity to break up a relationship when they bought a property together, right? I might do it if I was a first-time home buyer and I was trying to get into the market and I had a buddy and I'm trying to buy a property. I might think about it, but that's dangerous, right?
Because Nolan, after this podcast, me and Steve have a 45-minute presentation for you on a great investment.
Beautiful. No, I'll save you the time.
I want your opinion on this extended amortization fiasco, and I want to share some conversations I've had with some of my personal friends, like driving to hockey or what, like having these conversations based on Bank of Canada last week. where there are many people that are on the static variable, which pushes it to the interest, then you hit the trigger rate. And my friends that have that have actually said to me, although they are paying mostly interest right now, are saying, I'm still happy I'm on that because I don't want the bigger payment right now if I was on the adjustable one. Now, fine. I get not everyone's going to like that comment, but that's what was told to me by several people. I don't want to deal with the rest of the payment. I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it down the road. Like, I know that's probably not the right mindset to have, but if we're looking at the people that are just, the amortizations are at 50, 60 years right now, how does this end? Like, is there a way this could end that could be good? Are we just going to have to, because remember Nolan and I texted you, I was like, if rates do go down, Steve, let's say 3 years from now, rates go down, does the trigger rate work on the opposite, where they automatically make you force your payments down again? Like, I don't know. Are the amortizations being extended? I'm sorry for the long question. Are they propping up the Canadian housing market right now? Is this the only thing? How have there been no foreclosures?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there's two reasons why there's been no foreclosures. One is because those payments have remained manageable, and I think if everybody who was on a fixed payment variable moved to and was actually on an adjustable payment variable, I think we'd probably be in a pretty similar situation. And the reason for that is because jobs are still healthy and incomes are increasing, and all of those people qualified at pretty close to what they're at now.
Right.
It might be a little bit more tense, but not worse. But I think the bigger problem is, it's just like borrowing money. You borrow more money and you're creating more risk. I think kicking the can down the road and then making the payments significantly higher 2 to 3 years down the road, or creating scenarios where if the market turns 2 or 3 years down the road and you've got these properties that end up being underwater, I think everything they do to extend this out in that manner is basically creating more risk for the Canadian economy, for Canadian real estate. And that's scary. And then the question becomes, can we make it so there's a complete soft landing on this and hope that incomes go up enough, and that the real estate market stays propped up and the economy remains just good enough that this doesn't become a massive issue? Because if we can keep the economy kind of right where it is right now, get inflation down just a little bit, and then kind of like have everything remain where it is or get better over the next couple of years, we're probably okay. Everything's kind of in equilibrium. The problem is if we end up in a recession and job numbers go down and incomes go down and savings get dried up, and then we've also got this longer amortization thing to deal with, that's when it's like we created all this risk that could have catastrophically more pain.
And then if that happens and we go into that recession and people lose their jobs, wouldn't Bank of Canada then start decreasing the rates rapidly, and then that would change the amortizations? Like, I'm just trying to figure out how this actually plays out, right? Like, is it as bad as it could be, or is it somewhere in the middle of what people are talking about right now? Because I guess we don't know.
Well, you hope it's in the middle or similar to where it is now. The problem is that for a central bank to really alter an economy, what we're talking about is not increased interest rates. We're talking about reduced jobs, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's one thing to take a little bit of money out of everybody's pockets. It's another thing to take a ton of money out of a small portion of people's pockets. And if you can take if you can eliminate the money from a small portion of people, that's where you start to get the foreclosures. That's where you start to get the things that really create a recession and bring all the numbers back into line. So they're playing this fine balancing act of not getting there. And the scary thing is that once unemployment starts to happen, it's like a wildfire and it's gone. So it's like they're constantly on the edge of, are we crashing this thing, or are we going to keep it right where it needs to be? And you kind of hope that it's right where it needs to be, and then all this stuff isn't an issue. But if it becomes an issue, those longer amortizations have definitely increased the risk.
Steve, I hope you wrote down the time of the show, because what Nolan just said, it will be the intro to this episode. I 100%. Nolan, I want to share with you. So I went to a presentation by my company last week, and Chris Slidham, who will be a future guest on the show, he owns my Royal LePage. Very, very smart guy. I owe a lot to him. And he was going over the 7 key factors influencing the Canadian housing market. And then I took this and made a YouTube video on it. And mostly the response to this video has been very positive. But I want to go over these 7 key factors and see if we're missing anything. Can we add to anything? Just because we're all trying to make sense of this, right? And it's so complicated and there's so many variables. So factor number 1 is cost of ownership, meaning where interest rates are at, and access to capital, the ability to borrow money based on where stress test is at, based on amortization, everything, right? So cost of ownership. Number 2, job security. Okay. Unemployment rate. Number 3, population growth, both happening in the country and immigration adding to population growth. Mm-hmm. Number 4, an obvious one, supply. The supply of housing coming to the market, whether that be resale housing or new housing being built. Number 5, regulatory changes. Stress test, foreign buyer, vacancy tax, whatever your government does for your province in Canada that could change on a regulatory level. Number 6, global factors, war, personal freedoms, political unrest, refugees wanting to come here, which then goes back to our population on number 3. And then number 7, which I think may be the most important today, is replacement cost versus market value. What does it cost to replace the same home today? What can you build the new housing at? So quick recap, cost of ownership, job security, population growth, supply, regulatory changes, global factors, and replacement cost. That's what at least was presented to us as in these are the 7 key factors. Would you agree with that? Would you disagree? Would you change anything in those?
Yeah, I mean, he basically covered everything that could possibly be a factor in the Canadian real estate market or any real estate market. I think the one that is probably the most important and the one that maybe summarizes a lot of this is market imbalance. There's certain markets that are completely out of whack. Like we had Jordan Skrinko.
Yeah,
we had him. So
I say his last name wrong all the time. I'm so sorry, Jordan. Yeah,
pre-condo.
He's pre-condo. I was fine until I saw you try to say it on a podcast, and now I'm all screwed up.
Hey,
it's
Nolan,
exactly
Nolan.
how it's written.
Nolan. Pierre Polyev.
PP. Call him PP. Hey, I'm Nolan
Matthias
Matthias,
for the longest time. Anyway, sorry, John.
So
Jordan.
we had him on, and he was talking about the outlying areas of Toronto, like Hamilton, I think is, and Windsor and all of that stuff. And he was talking about how the pre-condo sales are out of whack, and not only are they out of whack. He didn't say out of whack. I'm saying they're out of whack. He gave us some data, and I'm interpreting that as out of whack. And basically, like they're selling for way beyond what is break even on renting them out. So in other words, like if things stay the same and people buy them, these people are going to be subsidizing the renters. And to me, like that is market imbalance. And what we know about economics is that as long as you let the market act, things will always come back to balance, which means that either those values have to go up significantly or they're going to come down significantly so that rents are in line and so that those properties break even. So that's the thing that I think he's probably missing is where are the imbalances here? And those imbalances are definitely going to act on the real estate market.
But what does break even mean? Because you're probably saying that is 20% down and then it breaks even at 20% down. Why is it that 20% down would have to be the correct calculation to break even and it can't be 30% down? Because 20% down is just an arbitrary number.
Well, no, I think 20% is because you don't need the mortgage insurance. I think that's why we said that.
But why is that? That's just where we've decided to put that number. So to me, that doesn't really make a ton of sense because you're not, like, there is no reason why 20% down other than CMHC insurance, or that's what the government says, that 20% down is the correct amount of equity to have in a property when you buy it.
No, but so not looking at it from that perspective, but looking at it from an economics perspective. The economics perspective of it is that is the maximum loan to 80% is the maximum loan to value you can legally purchase a property in Canada for, or a rental property in Canada for. So from an economics perspective, that is the least path of resistance, which means that is where the majority of people who are buying rental properties are going to be buying at. So if the majority is buying there, okay, maybe adjust it for the small few who are going to put a higher percentage down. But at the end of the day, if the majority are buying there, that's kind of where the number is that you have to look at. And then if they aren't breaking even at that down payment, what that tells us is that it's going to have to, something has to change, right?
Can I take it one step further? Then when we talk about breaking even in UK, so you look at the total cost of ownership, and let's say it's a freehold property, right? You got property taxes, you got your mortgage, you got your hydro, maybe the tenants pay that, you can figure that out, right? But let's say property taxes and mortgage, but then you take the mortgage and you break the mortgage into principal and interest. So what if you're renting it for $2,000 a month and the $2,000 covers all of your property taxes, all of your interest portion of your mortgage, and half of your principal, but then you're negative 500, but it's principal? Is that just me being a real estate agent saying you're not like, we're trying to make up excuses here, but it's your money, right? It's still your money, that portion of it.
Yeah. I mean, what it comes down to is how much people will have the ability to subsidize. Okay. And if the other things in the economy, like the jobs numbers, start to affect how much people can subsidize. So let's say some dude's got his principal residence, he's got 4 rental properties because somebody told him that was a good idea, and he's got 0 cash and he loses his job. And his 4 rental properties are all being subsidized by $500 a month. See it done, foreclosure, those are all gone. That brings the real estate values down, and you start to head in that direction of, and I mean, it all comes back to basically jobs and income, right? Is if people can afford to subsidize them, they will. Whether it's a good idea or not is another question. But if that jobs number changes, or there's some other surprise in the economy that makes it so that it's hard for people to continue to subsidize those rents, or maybe rents come up and everything's taken care of and it's totally fine. But it's the question of what's going to change.
It's so tough to have that conversation with renters right now because, as we've seen with the rate hikes, the rental prices across Canada have completely gone up. But it's actually getting to the point that it's like, it doesn't feel good at all for anybody. I'm looking at rental stuff in Toronto right now, looking at it like I was looking at sale prices in February of 22. I'm like, what's going on? I almost swore for the first time on the podcast. I can't make sense.
Yeah, right.
I think the first time. Anyways.
Oh, no, they've been pointed out, Tom. You swear often. You just tuck it under your breath.
I just tuck it under my breath. So for renters, a lot of renters right now want interest rates to continue to go up because then it should crack the market and they'll have opportunity. And I'm just wondering if it's really going to give them the outcome they're looking for. But if rates go down, it's not going to help them either because there's just no winning, right? You just got to find a way to get into the market.
Yeah, I think what people need to realize is they need to start focusing on the things that they don't have control, or stop focusing on the things they don't have control of, and start focusing on only what they have control of. And if they're waiting for X, Y, or Z to happen, then there's a really good chance that they're going to be waiting a long time, right?
Nolan, I got one final question for you. I want you to tell us about the podcast that you've launched. I want to know what's going on, what you're doing, where are they coming out, where do we find it? Because people watch you all day long on your channel, and now you've given them an opportunity to watch you for a lot longer at once, or listen. So where do they find the podcast? What's it called?
Yeah, so the podcast is called The Real Estate 100 Show. It's with a father and son mortgage team out of Nanaimo, Greg Noack and Miles Noack. Greg Noack's a former mortgage broker of the year. He's a guy who is an amazing mentor to me. Miles is like a young up and coming dude, knows his stuff really, really well. And basically we've got, we could call it 3 different generations of mortgage people, and we're discussing real estate. So we have a lot of different perspective on it. Made for some really, really interesting conversations. And, we've put it up there. We'll see how it goes. But it's there. And if somebody wants to see us have conversation in long form format, what's interesting about Greg and Miles and the retention graphs on these podcasts is that people actually skip the parts where I'm talking now and they're listening to Greg and Miles, which is pretty cool. That's how insightful those two are. So Real Estate 100, you can go and look it up there. And I have a feeling that we're going to have an episode that launches with you, Tom, on the same day that this one goes live.
You should have seen the title he put under my name was, Steve, when he had me on the show, which I'm blaming on you. I'm not gonna say it. You can go watch and find out. It'll be.
I'm gonna have to tune in. Wait, Tom.
Yeah.
I have my final thought.
Oh wait, before you have your final thought, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
Nolan, are we seeing you in person soon? Is that happening?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm registered. I'm coming.
The Three Stooges will be together in Vancouver in July. I can't wait.
You can get your new Tom Storey Show dot in Vancouver if you're at the Richard Robbins event. So
and for all of our listeners, he's showing a sticker on the screen just so you know what he's talking about.
It's the blue dot. We've got real life blue dots now.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry to cut you off, Steve.
And I'll bring my red flannel and we can do drinking with Nolan. Bring a big bottle of Jack Daniels and yeah.
That live stream we did, it must have been was last September, right? So not quite a year ago. That was the chat still in that makes me crack up thinking of people were typing
do that again.
as we were talking.
We are stacking up the lives, which are I don't know how that's going to go. We might have to toss some special episodes.
Not going live, but doing podcasts in person.
Sorry, the in person podcast. Tom, earlier in this episode, rewind if you need to. You said we were going to talk about your personal mortgage situation.
Right. Nolan, do you have 5 more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
My mortgage is up January 2024. So I got 6 months left. When I bought my house, January 2023, took a 1-year fix because I wanted to, not fully commit to the market, but just see what's going on. The rate I got at the time, because of when I got approved, it was under 5%. It was pretty good. Right now, it is not that if I were to go with another short-term fixed. What do I do?
I would go and fill out a mortgage application today at mortgage360.ca.
Yep.
And we would get you a rate hold, 4-month rate hold. That's not going to put you all the way to January, but what it is going to do is if interest rates go up, it's going to protect you. And if you have to pay it out 3 months early and to get the lower rate, then you do that. And otherwise, I'd just kind of stay in a holding pattern. That's a long time in this interest rate market.
What about the term?
I don't think the term's a decision that you'll be able to make until probably December, January. Is it late January or early January?
19th of January.
Yeah, so I think you'll probably want to start looking at what's happening in the early economic data of 2024 in the beginning of January when you go to make that decision. What's really going to be interesting, guys, is 2024 is an election year in the U.S. And historically speaking, that has an impact on the economy. It has an impact on inflation. It has an impact on interest rates, because in those American election years, central banks are really cautious about doing things that could alter the outcome of an election. Obviously, the governments that are in power are really interested in making that year look really good and people feel good or feel horrible, depending on which side of the equation they're on. So there's going to be a lot kind of in 2024 that could have a major impact on interest rates, not only in the US, but worldwide. And the decisions that will be made are going to be different based on the fact that some will want a different government and some will want the government to stay the same.
I'm sure everyone will just get along swimmingly and there'll be no issue and everyone will be happy with the result.
I have an anecdotal thing for you to correct me if I'm wrong, Nolan, but I would not commit to anything in November. Historically, from what I've seen, November is because of, I think it has to do with most of the big banks and their fiscal year end.
Yep.
They just are not interested in low rates in November. So maybe lock in, but don't commit, because I think if you actually commit in January, you'll probably end up with a lower rate.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like doing my homework last minute, though. It's like wait until the night before. It's a little scary.
That sounds like how you would do it, though.
I just didn't do my homework.
I think the strategy starts now, right?
Yeah.
Because if rates go up by 1% between now and November, you know that your rate hold from today is going to be a good idea.
Yeah.
The thing about what Steve's mentioning is the year ends for the banks and how much available funds they have for lending at that point in time. Now, what's going to be interesting this year is that all those banks are going to have some capacity at the end of the year, which, unlike the last couple of years where like like certain banks just increased their rates, stopped lending in September, October because they're already at their limits. Yeah. I think this year there may be, especially with one of the banks, there may be a tendency at the end of the year to get real competitive because of how little lending they've done this year. So it could be an interesting year end. And that's one thing we didn't talk about in the podcast is, especially with the commercial real estate books and how those are looking, it could be a really interesting year end for different lenders. So
and it might play a different we're seeing, I don't know if you're sending any of your clients this way right now, Nolan, but we're seeing certain credit unions here in BC have ridiculously low rates, like crazy low rates, a full % lower than a lot of the big banks. And so a lot of people are opting into those. Really hard to get approved there. It takes forever to get approved there. But some really, really interesting rates on the credit union level.
Yeah. And that's just, they have the funds available and they're trying to get them lent out, right?
Interesting. Well, Nolan, you did not disappoint. You came back for the three-peat. This is the third time you've been on the show officially, plus a bonus, and we're hoping another bonus maybe in July. We'll do something fun. Wanted to thank you so much. For anyone watching or listening that hasn't already checked out Nolan's channel, although I'm assuming a lot of you already have, type in Nolan Matthias to YouTube and you'll find him. Nolan, you're approaching 40,000 subscribers, which is a massive milestone. So I want to congratulate you on that. You continue to put out the best content online. Like I've told you this before, we started watching you and then became friends. So it's just cool to see that you're continuing. You've taught me and Steve so much on the YouTube side. And what I continue to be proven correct with is that all the people doing things at a high level in any business are willing to share what's working for them. So on behalf of me and Steve, thank you for sharing with us what's working for you, because it's helped me hopefully kick this guy's ass to 10,000 subscribers.
And it's going to happen because of that last video you posted.
I had an external one go like 30,000 views. No one watched more than 30 seconds of it, but it took off really well. And yeah, that helps the subscriber bump. But Nolan, final thoughts for the show this week?
Just thanks for having me. One last final thought. Steve, you got the gym equipment behind you. You look great, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Working on it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Working hard.
Congrats on that.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
All right. Well, I'll see you guys both soon in person. I'm very excited for that. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. If you've made it this far, leave us a comment. Let us know you made it until the end. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave us an audio review. Have an amazing day, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Nolan. That was great.
Wicked. Thanks.